And good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for tonight's webinar on the School of Architecture, Art, and Historic Preservation here at Roger Williams. My name is Marcus Hanscom. I'm the Director of Graduate Admission here, and I'm joined by Greg Laramie, who's our Associate Dean of the School of Architecture, Art, and Historic Preservation. And we're going to talk a little bit. We're going to try to cater our discussion to the folks that are on. So we know we have students here interested in our Master of Architecture program, as well as our Master of Science in Historic Preservation program. And we'll talk briefly about the certificates as well. And if you have any questions as we go throughout the session, you'll notice on the right side of your screen, or likely on the footer of your phone if you're on a mobile device, there is a questions box there, and you can ask any questions that you have there, and we'd be happy to answer them as we go throughout the session. So without anything further, I'm going to bounce further and tell you a little bit more about the university, and then I'll pass it over to Greg to tell you more about the programs. So if you haven't heard of us prior to now, we're a private nonprofit institution with locations in both Bristol and Providence, Rhode Island. The MArch and the SAAHP programs are delivered at our Bristol campus, which is really nice because it's centrally located. It's close to Providence, only about a half-hour drive to Providence. We're an hour from Boston, so really prime location for great opportunities for internships, both for architecture and preservation. And we're only about 25 minutes, 30 minutes from Newport, Rhode Island, which really gives a great living laboratory for our preservation students. We have a number of historic communities, both in Bristol as well as Warren, and also Newport with the famous mansions down the Cliff Walk. So there's a lot of great opportunities with this location for our graduate students in the School of Architecture, Art, and Historic Preservation. We have about 3,800, it's about closer to 4,000 undergraduate students, and between 600 and 700 graduate and law students. We are the only law school in Rhode Island as well, so that's a nice benefit to having those students here. And one thing that's really kind of speaks to the mission of the institution, and one of the reasons why I came here as an employee about 4 years ago, was that the institution really has a commitment to serving the community and giving back and serving the public good. So we're not just about giving you a degree and getting students here and concerned about numbers and that kind of stuff. We're really focused on making sure that you have a high quality degree that gives you opportunities to give back to the community and give back to your industry and ultimately get you a really great job. And that mission really fits in well with the architecture and preservation programs because it gives you opportunities to do community-based projects and internships and service opportunities that Greg will talk to you a little bit more about in a few minutes. So this is a quick picture of our campus, obviously not taken this time of year. It's pretty cold here at the moment, but this was a nice fall picture overlooking the campus, and this is looking southward toward Aquidneck Island, which is where Newport is on the south end. So it's a really nice campus, and again, really centrally located, and even some of our students take advantage of opportunities to do internships in New York City, even Hartford or New Haven, Connecticut. And we've obviously got Providence close by, even Worcester, Massachusetts, just a little over an hour from us. So we're in a really good location with a lot of major cities close by that afford some great job and internship opportunities. So if you're coming from outside of the area, I know a number of you are, we are convenient to the Green Airport in just outside of Providence, Rhode Island, and also Logan Airport in Boston. You see that's our location there at Roger Williams in Rhode Island. And you see the star there on that map is where we're exactly located, right on the water. So it's a really nice campus, especially in the summertime. And we're close to a lot of great nightlife, shopping, restaurants, all that kind of stuff. So there's really good student life opportunity here in addition to your studies. And for most graduate students, especially relocating, you really want to take advantage of the area and the various opportunities that we offer on campus. And you'll be spending an awful lot of time in the studios and in your internship placements and with other students in your program. So we always encourage students to get involved outside of your studio space and outside of the school to get an opportunity to kind of really have a really rich graduate student life while you're here. So I'm going to pass it over to Greg to have him talk a little bit more about the programs.
Thanks, Marcus, and good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm happy that you're interested in Roger Williams architecture and preservation programs at the graduate level. I think that the synergy between both architecture and historic preservation is really important and one of the hallmarks of our school, both thinking of from an architectural point of view and the resilient and sustainability point of view of the reuse of existing buildings, and from a preservation point of view about understanding the role of the built environment and how we can better sustain that built environment. So we have the Master of Architecture degree. This is an accredited degree by the National Architectural Accrediting Board, and the Master of Science in Historic Preservation. The graduate certificates, so if you're an architecture major, you can choose to get a 5-course certificate in preservation, or if you're either in either master's program, you can also do a certificate in urban and regional planning. And as Marcus mentioned earlier, these are offered in the School of Architecture building on the Bristol campus. And entrance into the program, both programs actually, are either through 3 different paths. But in architecture, we'll start out with, for Path 1 students, those are those who have done their undergraduate Bachelor of Science degree in architecture. Path 2 are for students who have completed a pre-professional program, either a Bachelor of Science or Bachelor of Fine Arts or Bachelor of Arts in Architecture as an undergraduate degree. And then the Path 3 program, which is a 3-year plus a summer program for those who do not have an undergraduate degree in architecture. Our graduate enrollment hovers right around 100. We're going to be inching up to about 108 to 110, we think, next year. And as I mentioned, we're accredited by the National Architectural Accrediting Board. We actually had our accreditation visit last spring and got an 8-year accreditation term, which is the longest you can get. But even more notably, we met all of the student performance criteria that we had to meet completely, so that we got a perfect accreditation visit, which is pretty rare, and we're very proud of that. So like many schools, the courses that you'll be taking are, of course, in the design studios, and depending on your undergraduate degree program, and your portfolio would determine actually the number of studios that you would have to take. Everyone ends their master's program in architecture with a thesis project. That is, what comes before that would include the integrated comprehensive studio and at least two graduate topical studios. And then depending on the undergraduate degree that you have would determine how many core design studios that you would take. And usually it's the design studios that determine the number of semesters that you would be in school. Coupled with that are the requirements in the history theory area, including history of modern architecture, theory of architecture, and then one intermediate and one advanced history theory elective. Our courses in environment and human behavior, one of the courses, the environmental design research course, was one of the courses that was noted with distinction in the accreditation report, along with, I should have mentioned earlier, the integrated comprehensive studio. Then, of course, there are the technical systems, and this is the area that we most often give transfer credit approval for students who have taken courses in their undergraduate program, practice and professional development, and then 4 graduate electives. So the way an architecture student might take or earn a certificate in either preservation or urban and regional planning would be to focus their electives in that area and then take one additional course. We are unique in graduate programs in that there is a study abroad opportunity for students who would like to go to Barcelona and or Beijing. And to be honest, we send more students to Barcelona. We've only sent a few students to Beijing. but the program is integrated so that it's seamless the way that you would earn your degree, and it would be one semester abroad. And there are opportunities to actually get an internship abroad, and I'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about the career investment program overall, because that applies to both architecture and historic preservation students. One of the things that's unique about the Roger Williams architecture and preservation programs are that in architecture, we have what we call the rCloud computing system that is a virtual desktop or cloud-based computing system that allows you to have access to any of the 119 programs that are on the cloud from anywhere that you have internet access. And so that coming with a laptop, we have partnered with Samsung to provide every student with a 27-inch monitor at their desk. Plus there are 10 65-inch interactive whiteboards throughout the building for presentations or for collaborative work. And so our students who study abroad in Barcelona, for instance, have the exact same computing interface because they log on from Barcelona to our central server. And some of the virtues of this are that everyone is working on the same platform, so that when you are doing collaborative work, you can be assured that the various aspects of your project are accessible to other people. And you're assured of using the latest versions of the software because we just updated on the cloud, and then it's sent out to everybody through the cloud. And the good thing is we're actually undergoing an upgrade to the central server as we speak. It should be done in about a week and a half. And this is going to be doubling the amount of memory that is available to each student from 1 gigabyte to 2 gigabytes. So we're real excited about that. And this is, again, unique among architecture schools in the country. Another unique thing is our teaching firms and residents. This is where I think our location between New York and Boston is particularly significant because we have access to some of the best architecture firms in the world who like to teach but are oftentimes too busy to teach. But through our teaching firms and residence program, we hire 2 firms each semester to teach a studio. And what they do is they virtually treat it like a job in their office, and they assign a team to actually undertake the class. And oftentimes the students will actually go to the practitioners' offices for presentations or for consultation with some of their consultants, structural engineers, and other specific ones. And oftentimes you're working on projects that the firm is either interested in getting or interested in doing more research. Most recently, we were working with David Hassin and Associates from Boston, and the other firm was the designers of that middle building in the Boston office of Perkins and Will. But there's some great firms that come in and teach, and these are one of the topical studios that graduate students have an option to participate in. And I think overall it means that we have a bunch of alumni that are in real significant places. I was just out in Seattle, and Natasha Sandmeyer, who I had as a student back when she was a sophomore in college, who used to work for OMA and then went to the AA in London and is now at SAAHP in Los Angeles as a faculty, was a project manager for OMA for the Seattle Public Library. And she saw my postings that being there and contacted me saying how much she enjoyed working on that job and how much she missed it. But other people who who are in significant roles. Chris Mulvey from SAAHP Architects is now the managing principal. He had been in Shanghai and had managed that office for a number of years, but is now back in Boston. And then Carl Daubman, who's now dean at Lawrence Tech. Of course, all of these things making you feel really old. David Burns from Studios Architecture, who did the Dow Jones trading floor that you see on the screen there. These are all alums that have been part of the program. We have a number of corporate partners. These are people who not only participate in our career investment program, which again I'll talk about in a little bit, but also become part of our partnership council that is offering suggestions, advice, consultation, working with us on the cloud-based computing system, technical systems, things of that sort that we partner with continuously. And in addition, there are a number of nonprofit and government partners. Students tend to work on, again, through our Community Partnership Center, something I'll talk about in just a bit. But these are opportunities for students to have involvement with while they're here in the program. The Master of Science in Historic Preservation program was founded within what was the oldest undergraduate preservation program in the United States at Roger Williams. Depending on your undergraduate degree, you're going to be looking at anywhere from 32 to 52 credit programs, so that's anywhere from 2 to 4 semesters. It includes emphasis on preservation, planning, archival research, conservation, economics, and law. And that's one of our students who happened to have an interest in masonry restoration. So he was interested in the conservation end of things, and he's working on one of the Preservation Society of Newport County mansions. I think that's Rosecliff in Newport. It confused me a little bit because he was mostly working on the breakers, but the courses that you see listed there are what the current program has in it, and you can see how the courses touch on preservation aspects that deal exclusively with the built environment. There are some preservation programs that also have ancillary work on either document preservation or artwork preservation, and that is not what we do. Ours is solely involved with the built environment, and I think this works well with it being integrated with an architecture program. And so those are the list of courses that at present we have. We are actually in the process of realigning this list of courses. We recently received a grant from the 1772 Foundation to look at preservation education throughout the United States, and have been realigning the courses to better suit what the preservation community sees that it needs in our graduate students. And so students are now taking courses in real estate development and finance, which happens to be in part of the planning area of things and how we actually get projects to go ahead. In part of this grant is to be working on a project with a revolving fund. We're going to be doing our second project in the city of New Bedford, Mass, shortly, where we'll be looking at a theater that's been abandoned for a number of years. The conservation lab students will be looking at the materials of the building, and there's a range from masonry to wood to ironwork, very intricate plaster work, in the building. So the conservation students will be looking at the preservation of those materials. The planning workshop people will be looking at how to move the project forward and how it integrates itself into the larger planning process that New Bedford is going through. And I should mention that this is a real project. It's a project that will actually get done. And then in addition to those two preservation classes, there will be an architecture graduate studio looking at the same project on how to rehab the building and to put a new use into the building. And we will be working with one of our teaching firms in residence to actually look at the project. I believe Design Lab out of Boston is coming down to work at that. And this is in association with Whale, which is a not-for-profit group in New Bedford. And so we're real excited about this. Last year, we did another project with Whale. That project is now out to bid. It has a $20 million budget for it. And so that project is going out to bid that we did last year. This project that we're doing this spring is just getting going. If I can just mention one other thing about this Teaching Practices and Partnership program funded by 1772 Foundation. It also includes partnerships with other schools around the country. So Clemson, Tulane, Penn in Philadelphia, and University of Washington are all schools that have signed up for the same program and will be doing projects of their own in their cities. And what will happen is at some point we'll all get together and look at how the projects came about. So there's a lot of cooperative and collaborative work throughout the school, and in this instance it just demonstrates how architecture and preservation will be working together. So the outcomes that we're looking for and where students tend to focus their work. There are those who are interested in materials conservation. So students who like the one in the slide, who had a particular interest in masonry restoration is one such area. And they oftentimes work as a preservation specialist in architecture firms or for groups like Preservation Society of Newport County or other not-for-profits. And that segues into historic site and museum management. Preservation Society of Newport County, which owns the mansions, is the second largest attended museum in New England. And so some of our students in the past have gone on to help manage those areas or direct things that happen in those areas. And then students also go towards the planning and protection area, whether it's as large-scale planning, looking at historic districts for communities, or historians for firms, or environmental planning, cultural resources area. And so that's on the sort of larger scale. And then, of course, in advocacy, revitalization, and community development, those who find an interest in working with community groups oftentimes find themselves as advocates for preservation programs, field services, managers of Main Street programs. These are just lists of things where our graduates have gone on to in over the years that we've had programs. And this is just a list of some recent employers of our graduates, and that list can go on and on and on. We have a lot of graduates out there, and of course they become our network for contact throughout the preservation community. Both programs in architecture and historic preservation take advantage of the Community Partnership Center. This was a center that was started in our school and was established so that students and faculty could work on real projects based typically in not-for-profit or governmental groups throughout southeastern Mass and Rhode Island. And oftentimes the projects that get the most interest are those that have a foothold in architecture or preservation. Those are, I guess since it started in our school, those are the areas that the agency that typically come through it. But this is a university-based system, and I think that's one of the strengths of the program. So you might get students in the construction management program providing scheduling and financing work to these agencies. You might have law students looking at legal covenants, or engineering students helping with that end of it. So it is actually how projects move forward. And so you have an opportunity to leverage all of the areas of expertise that the university might have for these service projects that happen in our area. And as Marcus said, that the area is rich with a lot of these projects that are going on, and so we're able to take advantage of our location and work on real life projects before you graduate. I've been mentioning a couple of times the Career Investment Program. All of the MS&HP and MArch students are awarded a $3,000 annual funding for work in as a graduate assistant, either working for faculty or for working out in the field. So this is paid now at $18 per hour, so it's roughly 166 hours per year. And you can, the logos that you see up there are some of the people who have hired our students in the last few years. The Career Investment Program actually was recipient of an ACSA AIA National Award for practice partnerships, and the university commits roughly $400,000 per year to reimburse people in the professions and in the not-for-profit areas to hire our students. So the process is that you would go out and apply for a job as you would normally, or for an internship, I should say. And but with the added idea that the university would reimburse that firm if they hire you up to $3,000 per year. And oftentimes the students who are in the 2-year program will bank their hours, so they'll use year 1 amounts from May to June 30th, and then from July 1 to August 15th, we'll use year 2 hours. So there'll be $6,000 that they use to get an off-campus internship. We also have a Women's Leadership Network, which was funded by a presidential grant at the university. And this is looking at just the state of the building industry, knowing that there needs to be more equity in both pay and in job opportunities for women. And so this is a mentoring program through our connections to a number of people who have been in the industry, such as Beverly Willis, who is in her late 80s and one of the first female principals of her own firm ever in the country, through more recent graduates of Roger Williams and connections that we've made to provide young women still in school with ideas about what's going on in the profession and ways in which they can improve their standing in the field. So I've mentioned the graduate certificates. Again, just just so that you remember that you can, if you're in preservation, you could also, if you have an interest in urban and regional planning, you could dedicate your elective offerings to that area to get a kind of specialization in it. And architecture students can choose to do a concentration either in historic preservation or urban and regional planning. And our faculty are noted for their expertise in a number of areas. The faculty are in three types. One is the traditional full-time faculty whose work and publications you might see up on the screen. Right now we have a very strong art and architectural history faculty as part of our school. Faculty who have won national awards. For instance, that dark slide with the light is Memorial in France, Memorial to Slavery. That was a national competition by Professor Julian Bonder. And other work that you see there. So that's full-time faculty who predominantly teach and practice in certain special areas. Then we have some adjunct faculty who are primarily working in the field, but then teach a little bit as well and are active in both areas. And then in architecture, we have the teaching firms in residence.
All right, so I'll talk a little bit about the application process. Actually, before we get to that, there were a series of recent news articles covering the School of Architecture that I thought I'd mention. I probably should have screenshotted them and made them as part of the presentation, Greg. I hadn't thought about that. But the first of which being the accreditation that Greg referenced. And so not only did we meet those, I think 37 points of accreditation for an AAB, but there were 7 or 8 of them that were met with distinction. So the school is really recognized for high quality across the facilities and the faculty and the outcomes and what students are doing here. So it's a really high quality experience that you'll have across the School of Architecture, Art, and Historic Preservation. And we also had, Greg didn't mention that he and Steve White, our dean, had received a national award by the American Collegiate School or Association of Collegiate Schools of Architecture, ACSA, which many of you are familiar with, for the Career Investment Program in March. That was in Denver at their national conference, and it was recognizing that that's the only program of its kind in the country, and really acknowledging the work opportunities that it provides for our students in both preservation and architecture. So some really great stories there. And then more recently, one of our graduating second-year AMARC students did her senior thesis project with Julian Bonder, as Greg had referenced on our previous slide, on refugee camps, particularly in Syria, and how they can be better designed for quality of life. And so it was a very interesting story that interesting project that she provided, and it was covered by a lot of our local news outlets. So we're getting a lot of notoriety and recognition for the type of experience that you get here. So we'd be happy to share those stories with you if you're interested. Now, I know a few of you have applied already, and a few of you are also starting your applications. So you should generally be familiar with the process, so I won't spend too much time there. But you can apply on our website. And if you, as a thank you for coming at tonight's session, we have a fee waiver code for you. So you see that at the bottom of the screen. So if you just write that down and enter that in the invoice discount section on the application, that'll waive your $50 application fee. In addition to your application, you'll need to submit your official college transcripts from anywhere that you've earned any sort of college credit. So that could be a community college for a couple of courses in the summer, could be an associate's degree or your bachelor's degree, or even a master's if you've already earned one. You can send those to us. They just have to be official, so they have to either be sealed and mailed from your college, or they can be sent to us as electronic transcripts if your school provides them. For both programs, we require 2 letters of recommendation. They should be from either faculty or a professional source like an internship supervisor or an employer. We just don't want family or friends for these types of things, but we want somebody who can speak to your ability to handle a graduate level course load, work in teams, produce high quality work, deal with conflict, those types of things that would be part of your graduate experience. We also ask for a personal statement or a letter of intent, and that's really just a page to 2 pages double-spaced discussing your interest in the program, whether it be preservation or architecture, and ultimately what you want to do. What do you want to do in the field? What do you hope you'll contribute to the program here? Why do you think we should select you to be part of the cohort here? And if there were any sort of academic hardships that you had in your undergraduate studies, this is a good opportunity to detail that a little bit. I wouldn't spend 2 pages on it, but if you have some things in your background that you'd like to discuss to us that help us provide more context for your decision, you can add that here. For architecture students, we also ask for a portfolio. Typically, we're looking for 8 to 10 pieces of work, and our students submit those in a variety of ways. So we've seen them in hardbound. We just had 2 students send us hardbound books this week. Most of our students submit online now, so you can go on to SlideRoom and provide it there, or you can email it to us. But oftentimes those files are large, so if you have a cloud drive link, that's perfectly fine. So we often have students that send us a Dropbox link and we download it and share it with the faculty to review as part of your application. For those of you applying for preservation, we ask for a research sample, and usually this is of 10 pages or more in length and just gives us an idea of your writing ability and your ability to cite properly and do appropriate research at the graduate level. If any of you have any sort of work experience or research experience or internships, things that would be relevant to your program and to be considered, I always encourage students to submit a resume. It can only help you because it'll give us some kind of insights into your work background and the experiences that you bring to the classroom. So you can apply on our website. There's an apply link on every page, so you can just click on that and select graduate. And anything you have to mail, you can send to our main address there you see on the screen in Bristol, Rhode Island, so that's our main campus. Personal statements, resumes, even your letters of recommendation can be submitted via email, although most of you will put your recommender contact information right on the application itself, and they'll be able to submit your letter on your behalf. So you don't have to worry about horsing around to try to find your letters of recommendation. If your recommenders prefer to mail a hard copy, that's fine. They can mail it directly to us there. It just can't come from you as the student. So wherever it comes, it must come from the recommender directly. So an email is even acceptable there. As I mentioned, you can use SlideRoom. If you've used that before, you can just upload that on the online system, mail or deliver your portfolio to us, or even use the email address that you see on the screen. So anything you email, regardless of which material you're sending, is please use the gradadmit@rwu.edu email address, and that'll get right to our staff here, and we can process it for you. Both programs are now adhering to a new deadline schedule. As our programs have grown and gotten more competitive, we've had to kind of realign how we admit our students. So the first priority deadline is actually coming up. So that's a week from tomorrow on January 15th. So if you submit all of your application materials by the 15th of January, you'll be sent over in that first wave of priority deadline students, and you'll have a decision by February 15th. So we'll be guaranteeing you a month or less to get your decision from that date. Similarly, if you don't complete by the 15th, you'll be considered for the March 1st deadline, and we also will offer a 30-day response at most for that application. And finally, if you don't meet either of those deadlines, we'll do a final review on May 1st. The trouble if you wait too long is that some courses will be filled if you're admitted, so the capacity of the program fills a little bit sooner, and so you'll have the optimal consideration opportunities for funding and for admission decision and your schedules if you apply sooner. So just consider those, but if you have any questions throughout the process, please feel free to contact our office in graduate admission. We can help kind of coach you through what your options will be. And then if you're admitted, there's ultimately a $200 enrollment commitment deposit. You can pay that to secure your space in class, and we'll ask for that by May 1st. If you receive any funding, we ask for that for April 15th. So speaking of funding, many graduate students are paying for a good portion of their education at the master's level through federal loans. And this is very obviously a personal decision for students. So depending on your own personal financial circumstances, you may or may not need to take loans. but federal loans tend to be the most frequently used source of tuition money for graduate students. So the programs available to you are both the federal direct unsubsidized loan that provides $20,500 per year for all of our graduate students. You're no longer putting your parent information if you were still going to be considered filing with your parents for tax purposes or otherwise. So you will fill out the FAFSA without your parent information and be considered for that $20,500 annual loan. That's typically available to all of our graduate students, so it's not a need-based loan. And then if you need more money beyond the $20,500, you can also borrow in the Federal Direct Plus Loan program, which you've probably heard of the Parent Plus Loan in your undergraduate studies. It's just the Plus Loan now, so you don't need that cosigner. This is you as a graduate student independently. And the only difference between the two is the interest rate. You see it's 6.6% on the Federal Direct Unsubsidized Loan, and it's a percentage point higher on the Plus Loan. The advantage to these loans is that you have flexible repayment terms. Oftentimes you can get income-based repayment plans. So if you graduate and you're making a lower salary than you might be making 5 or 10 years after graduation, then you can have kind of a progressively growing payment over time as opposed to paying a normal payment there, especially if it provides any sort of hardship. And you can pay over usually 15, 20, or even 25 years, depending on your personal circumstances. And you also have, depending if you go into a loan, if you go into a public service type position, then public service loan forgiveness is still available as well. So there's a lot of advantages to those federal loan programs. When you are borrowing for the sake of the cost that you need, financial aid is available to you to cover your tuition and your fees, your books, as well as any miscellaneous and housing expenses that you have while you're in school. So when you complete the FAFSA, financial aid will work with you on providing a total cost of attendance under a budget. And that budget is basically to help to prevent you from over-borrowing, but also gives you a sense of some options if you needed to borrow money for supporting yourself while you're in school, because many of you are relocating, so you might need housing expenses while you're here and food and other things, especially if you aren't working, although you have the Career Investment Program to help offset some of that for you. If you haven't completed the FAFSA before, it's just fafsa.ed.gov, so you can reach it there. And to my understanding right now, FAFSA processing is still moving forward. The only challenges with the government shutdown right now are tax-related, so the FAFSA processing is continuing because the Department of Education is open currently. Now, for institutional funding for these various programs, our architecture students, if you have a 3.0 cumulative GPA or higher, you'll automatically be considered for a $6,000 annual scholarship, and that'll follow you the whole time that you're here, so that's a nice chunk of money right off the top. Architecture programs are traditionally more expensive, so we recognize that and we make that funding available to students in recognition of high academic achievement. We also have the Career Investment Program, as Greg talked about, and forgive me, I didn't update the bullet on the screen, but it is paid at $3,000 per year at $18 per hour, and so that gives you about 166 hours, and it's designed to be seed money, so ultimately many of these companies will continue to pay you beyond the money that we have. So it's really to open the door and give you an opportunity that's no risk for the employer. And most of our students do such a good job of kind of proving how valuable they are to these various firms that they get picked up beyond that. So there's some really good funding opportunities that way. For students, once they're here as an architecture program, there are some scholarships available for current students in the program. They are fairly competitive and you have to apply internally. We also have the Rhode Island division or chapter of AIA that offers a number of scholarships each year, and our students typically get the majority of them. There aren't always a lot of applicants, so our students, it's really a low-hanging fruit for a lot of our students, but our students are also very competitive compared to some of the other programs in the area, and I think the only stipulation to be eligible for AIA, or at least the Rhode Island AIA scholarships, is that you're studying here or that you're a resident of Rhode Island, but you don't have to be a permanent resident here to be qualified as long as you're studying at an institution within the state. And just a little bit quickly about the recreation, or about student life. We have a recreation center here on our campus. It's open 7 days. That fee structure is actually changing this year. So we will have now architecture students have typically paid an annual comprehensive fee. We've actually cut that fee in half starting in the fall of 2019. We've done that for equity and a variety of other reasons. So our architecture students are actually paying better overall costs this year than they had in the previous year. So it's a good year to be coming if you're coming for architecture. But for all of our students, we will now have a comprehensive fee available, as well as optional fees like the recreation center, and that will be a reduced fee. We're targeting $50 a semester, which would be, I think, really good for our students and significantly less expensive than our local gyms. So that'll be an optional fee, as well as our health services if you wish to use that. And then students who don't have health insurance have health insurance as an option here as well. But beyond that, our comprehensive fees now are a little bit more equitable and give you some good opportunity that not only supports various services on campus and our Graduate Student Association, but more importantly, our AIAS student chapter, which is one of the most active AIAS chapters in the country. And our students have a lot of great opportunity with guest lectures, and they do trips and sponsor various things. The university sponsored the Northeast Quad of AIAS several years ago in Pittsburgh. And you've seen that photo there that we went to Fallingwater, and that was a trip that we took. We sponsored with about 40 students from around the region. So those are the different types of kinds of things that we do, as well as the networking and other opportunities that you have. And that funding not only allows for some of the activities, but also supports students going to conferences, and students do a lot of fundraising and other things. So it's a very active organization, and that's something that the school really actively supports, the students having those opportunities. And then outside of that, if you like the water, we're in a great location. We've got paddleboard and kayak rentals, right, because we're right along the shoreline. So it's a really great spot and close to a lot of different things. So I encourage you, if you can, stay connected with us if you're not already. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn as well. But almost more importantly, I'd say here is that second Facebook link. If you decide that you want to be part of the student community here, you can request to be a member of that group, so it's not an open group. And so we keep it so that there's not anyone that isn't really related to the university here. So even as prospective applicant, you can join that group as well. And it's good to just kind of meet other students, ask questions about programs. It's a great place where a lot of our students, particularly in architecture and preservation, find their roommates or housing opportunities for the fall. So all of those, it's a really good place to connect with the student community here that's a little bit more private. And so that's all the information that I have and that Greg has provided. We are happy to answer any questions that you have now. And you can see there's a questions box on your screen, so you can enter those questions if you have them. And if you have any questions more that you want to direct to us directly, maybe offline, you can reach us at the phone or email addresses you see on the screen. So we appreciate you taking the time to learn a little bit more about our programs. What questions can Greg and I answer for you? We either covered a whole lot of territory, or we bored everybody, bored everybody to their bored their mother minds.
I think we end up covering a lot of territories.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing.
I do appreciate everyone who has signed on, and look forward to seeing your applications.
And actually, as we just said that, we got 2 questions in, Greg, so we stimulate a little bit of discussion here. So the first question: what opportunities for field learning or study do preservation students have? I know you touched on New Bedford, but maybe there are a few others you could talk about.
So each of the classes, whether it's the rehab workshop, the architectural conservation lab, archival research, and the preservation planning workshop, those are each of those courses is each of the 4 semesters of the graduate program. And they are always working on real projects. So archival research in the past 4 or 5 years has been working with the Newport Restoration Foundation, supported by the Doris Duke Foundation. They have 80 to 90 properties in Newport that the students are able to look at and provide archival work on the covenants of the projects. The students in planning have worked in as far away as Santo Domingo on the Dominican Republic, going to the site, looking at the historic center, or locally working on one of the abandoned school buildings in Bristol, Rhode Island. But we've worked on Main Street projects in Woonsocket, Broad Street in Providence. Gosh, there's been a whole bunch of them, and these are all projects that are hands-on field projects. Conservation as well is depending on the semester and what projects are actually underway for the faculty would depend on what projects are being used for. A number of years ago, they worked on a fire station in Fall River and produced a comprehensive preservation book. So it's the connection to real work in the field is ongoing and consistent throughout the whole program.
Great. Yeah, that's one thing that I know that on the admissions side, I often talk to some of the students once they got into the program and just kind of see how they're feeling. And students overwhelmingly say that's one of their favorite parts of our program and how applied that our program is, because many of the programs, there certainly are not a lot of master's programs in preservation, but many of them are very policy oriented, and our program certainly does dabble in policy issues because that's important, but our students are also very much more applied in our program compared to many of the others out there. There's one other question here, Greg, regarding admission. How many students get admitted to the Path 2 program in architecture each year? I'd estimate about 10. Does that sound about right?
I was going to say it's probably anywhere from 10 to 15 or 18 a year.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's we've gotten a lot more, especially the last few years. The Path 2 numbers have gotten even stronger as our program's gotten even more notoriety, not only nationally but internationally. And Greg touched on some of the alumni that are really active around the world, and we even have a lot of great speakers that come in. Greg touched a little bit on that. I can't remember that you mentioned the Obama Library. I didn't mention that, but Todd Williams and Billy Sen were on campus, and they actually taught a master's class while they were here, and then gave a lecture. That was last fall. And last semester we had David Hassin, which is one of the teaching firms, as well as a firm out of Chicago, who both did an exhibition and a lecture. Our lecture series runs, generally we have 4 lectures each semester and 2 gallery shows each semester. We have the preservation program has an endowed fund to bring lectures in every year. Okay, and then one other question that just came here, Greg, was related to the what the acceptance rate is for preservation students, namely the students outside of Roger Williams, so Path 2 or 3 students.
Marcus, I don't have the exact numbers, but generally my guess is that it's certainly in excess of 50% of applications. Probably, leaning towards a little bit higher, closer to 60% of those who apply. And really, through the application process, we really look at all of the pieces that you provide, the recommendation letters, of course, your transcript, number of people read your writing sample. And so if those are all in good order, we really look forward to having a robust class.
Yeah, I think that's about right from what I've seen, at least on the admissions side, and usually our strongest students do have a strong writing background and certainly a passion or an interest with preservation. Generally, students are not they're not always history majors or preservation undergraduate majors. In fact, we probably have more non-preservation majors than preservation.
Yeah, absolutely. That sometimes it's they might be history majors, or we had someone who came recently from interiors, but was mostly interested in the preservation aspect. So yeah, there's a number of different paths that people take to get to that program. People who are in construction who come in.
Yeah, I know I've talked with a number of students that are history undergraduate majors, and they often graduate unless they want to teach or do research in that area. They often wonder, well, am I going to stay? Then they're often very passionate about history, but then they look at the job opportunities and there are not a whole lot of options. So they look at a program like preservation because it gives a very applied program to complement the undergraduate history major that they've already achieved, and so it allows them to pursue something they're passionate about, but that's something very employable with marketable skills. And Greg, the student asked about the full-time versus part-time study in preservation. Can you talk about the options for part-time students as well?
Sure. So the program is really focused on more. I mean, there are more people who are full-time students. The part-time students generally comes a little bit later in the program. There just are the way that the courses are set up and how they work with each other is a little bit more typical, and also that while there are a couple of evening classes, there are more likely daytime classes. So we'd actually have to sit and look at the number of hours that the preservation students would be studying to see how viable it is. But it's generally, most of the students are here full time.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing that's a little bit challenging for a part-time student. I won't say it's insurmountable because it certainly isn't. We've had part-time students come, but the coursework being on campus and generally daytime coursework, and I can think of like the conservation or preservation labs, many of them operate like 9 to 12 in the morning, one day a week. It's a little harder if you're working, for example, and trying to fit that in. But if you have flexibility, certainly a part-time program is an option if you can come during the day. There's just not a lot of evening or even online coursework, although there's been more talk of late, especially since the 1772 support and some interest in real estate finance, that there's some opportunity to add some more online coursework over time. Well, I think we've covered everything. I saw there was a question related to the application fee waiver. If you've already applied, if we can credit that back, and the answer is yes, so we'll work on that for you. But in the meantime, if we can answer any questions that we haven't covered already, feel free to let us know. We'd be happy to talk with you at any time. So thanks so much for your interest tonight. If you have an opportunity to come to campus, we'd love to have you come and even sit in on a class, and you can meet with us. We'll even feed you lunch if you'd like. So just reach out.
And even more importantly, have an opportunity to talk to some of our students who are already here to get their view of the program. So yeah, we do encourage you to come to campus if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And our current students are more than willing to accept a free lunch on our dime. So if you want to come to campus, we'd be happy to host you for a lunch and a campus visit and class. So thanks again for your time tonight, Greg. Thanks for all your information, and we hope to hear from you all soon.
All right. Thanks for everybody. Take care.